Hey everyone. I see a bunch of us kind of entering in right now. So I'm just gonna talk for a little bit while a few more people join in so they can see the beginning of the webinar. But thank you for logging in and joining us for this container design basics with Jen. My name is Taylor. I'll be here as your moderator. I'll be in the chat and we'll talk about that in a second. But I just wanted to also fill this time a little bit with going over with some of the other webinars and seminars that are coming up so you can know about the future. We have some really fun summer spotlight series. We just had our making cocktails a few weeks ago, and so we have some more coming up on the 7th of July at 5 p.m. So that's Wednesday at 5 p.m. So it's a little bit different than our Saturday morning ones that we've been doing right now. But at 5 p.m. on Wednesdays, we're going to have our next one as a farm to table cooking. So we have someone who is a chef who does a lot of cooking with the garden stuff that she grows, and it's going to be really cool about some nice recipes that you can make with all the plants that you're able to grow. And then the week after that, on the 14th of July, again at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, we have a bee-friendly gardening seminar or webinar, and it's going to be really cool. We have a really nice lady who has her own whole bee farm, and she's going to talk about taking care of the bees and probably a lot of different information about having the bees in your own kind of garden, but also probably just about taking care and being bee-friendly gardeners in general. And then I believe 2 weeks right after that one, again on the Wednesday at 5 p.m., we have another summer spotlight series where it's going to be smartphone garden pictures and photography, which is something that I'm actually very interested in because I want to get better at my photography and being able to use your smartphone and all those features in there that you don't really look at, you just kind of take a picture. So she's going to go over all those different kinds of techniques to make really interesting photos of your garden, all your plants. So definitely check out some of those webinars as they come up. Again, they're on Wednesday, so it's a little bit different time. And hopefully that's working out for a lot of you. And then we will be doing some more Saturday morning ones like this on basic gardening tips and gardening kinds of stuff. So I'm really excited about today's one. So again, it's going to be on container gardening. So if you have questions throughout the seminar and you are interested in certain kinds of topics, or you want to clarify something, or you didn't hear something, or maybe you want us to make a suggestion for Jen, definitely drop it into the Q&A. I'll be looking through them and answering some of the questions that I can answer right away, and then gathering a few of them and relaying them to Jen. Most likely near the end of the webinar, but it might be a few in the middle if it comes up, as well as there's going to be the chat going. So if you want to talk in the chat a little bit amongst yourselves or with me, or just kind of throw some info about there or some comments, I'll be checking that as well. So questions in chat we're going to be going through. But yeah, I'm really excited about this seminar. Jen is a great container designer. She does a lot of stuff throughout all of Sloat in this kind of sense. And actually, when I first started working here, one of the first things that I did was attend one of her workshops that we had in the store back then, making some container gardens, making some succulent planters. And I still have the succulent planter. I think some of the succulents have moved around my garden at this point, but I still have the container and I use those tactics that she's taught on those days. So hopefully you get to learn some stuff too today. I'm gonna pass it over to Jen, let her get going, and this will be running for probably around 45 minutes to an hour. So sit back, ask some questions, and enjoy. Thanks, Jen.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is a little bit of a change up here because Taylor's moderating, Dan's behind the camera, and I'm talking. So this is kind of a fun switch up. Thanks for joining us. I have a lot of information. I just kind of want to dive in because I want to be sure to cover everything. And like Taylor said, if you have any questions, feel free to feed them into the Q&A and we'll try to answer as much as possible. So I've been a container designer for Sloat for the last, I think, 15 years. I've probably planted between 200 and 300 containers a year in that time. And the biggest thing I can tell you is that everybody has a different way of doing any one thing. So what you see me doing might be different from somebody else, but what I can tell you is it's worked for me for the last 15 years for however hundreds of containers I've done. So tried and true. Another thing I want to tell you about container gardening is that really anything can be planted in a container. Don't let a small space stop you. So you can do fruit trees, you can do edibles, you can do succulents, flowers, whatnot. You just have to adapt them to the space that you have. Another thing is to keep in mind that containers aren't really like set it and forget it. You want to assess them every 4 to 6 months because the plant is still growing. It's a fixed space. So every 4 to 6 months, you might have to take the plant out, cut the root, plant it back in, or replace a plant or cut back a plant and whatnot. So just keeping in mind that it's continuously growing. Okay. Choosing the right container. I have pulled several containers here just as an example. And I think that choosing the container is the biggest decision that you'll make. This is an opportunity to add a design element to your space. So whether you want to punch it out with a color or if you want to keep it more neutral. You also want to take in mind the material of the container. So a terracotta container is going to dry out a little bit quicker than a glazed ceramic or a plastic container. And that might be something that is to your benefit. If you're using more drought tolerant plants, you might want something that's not going to retain as much moisture as easily. Lightweight containers are nice to consider for patio situations that you can't have a bunch of weight on. Either these composite pots or these fiberlight pots are great. So again, just choosing the right container is going to be the biggest decision. Also keep in mind that the container color is really gonna interact with the plants differently. So just playing around with it, something like this in this container, in this black container, has a different feel than that same plant in a white container. So just looking at the interplay of the container color and the plants you're gonna put in and taking that into account with your design. Choosing the right plants. So this is a situation where you can possibly overthink it. And what I tend to do is just grab a bunch of plants that sort of I'm drawn to, and I don't overthink it as I'm choosing the plants in that moment. I sort of like gather them all together like I have here. And that gives me some things to play with as I'm starting to jump into the design of it. So just sort of as you're going around the nursery, pick out plants that you really just like. And I feel like if you like the plants, they tend to go together in some way. So don't overthink the plants when you're choosing them. Another thing is that what's unique about containers is that you can combine plants. It's kind of its own like environment where you can combine plants that maybe you wouldn't otherwise in the ground. So you can combine things that have slightly different water requirements in a container. And so that's kind of fun too, to just sort of add to that, how you can play with it and how you can play with the different plants. You also want to consider, do you just want a simple look? There's something very aesthetically pleasing about, a simple succulent in the middle of a container with some gravel on the top. That's a very nice, contemporary, clean look. You could have another look that's, a rectangular container with a row of plants. You have another look where it's full of herbs or full of flowers. One thing that I kind of like to experiment with is sort of monochrome design. So just different, you could do like different tones of green and combining that together and just seeing how those combinations come out. So it's just kind of fun to play with different ideas, like I said, and different combinations. There does exist an equation. I don't always use it, but it's kind of fun to say. So if you do want an equation for an approach to your container, thriller, filler, spiller. Okay, so a thriller is like the big thing in the center. It's, it could be a grass, it could be a large flower, just the taller thing, basically. And then like this thing. And then filler is exactly that, just some nice softness around it, whether it's another soft leaf or another flower that just sort of mounds up around the thriller. And then spiller, of course, is, you know, having some hang over the edge to soften the edge. So you don't have to use that equation, but it's kind of fun, and it's a good way to sort of like, as you're picking out your plants, you can sort of think about it like, is this the thriller? Is this the filler? And this, you know, which category does it fit in? And that helps sort of narrow it down and help with the design. Okay, let me see. Okay, choosing the right soil. You do want to think about what you're planting and make sure you do choose the right soil. So if you're doing a succulent container, choose, I don't know if you can see that, the cactus and succulent mix, potting soil. If you're doing herbs or flowers, just a regular or organic potting soil would be great. So keep in mind what plants you're putting together and choose the appropriate soil for that. Okay, really a couple more things, and then I'm going to do a demonstration, and then and we can take some questions. I do, in terms of planting your container, I did receive several emails about drought tolerant tips for container gardening. And I do want to say that containers are very similar to the ground in the sense that it's much better to water them deeply when you water, and instead of deeply let me see this. It's better to water them less frequently and deeply than more frequently and shallow. Okay. Got that up. So that's the same as in the ground. And the thing is you want to be sure that all of the soil in the ground is adequately, you know, moist and watered, and that is going to help with drought. We do have this thing called Soil Moist, which is a polymer. It's basically kind of like the stuff that they use in diapers, or somebody told me that once anyway. But what it does is these little tiny sort of like salt looking things that absorb the water and then gradually release it back into the soil. This is a way that you can help reduce the amount of times that you water. Just be sure to use sparingly. One little grain of this multiplies by like 100. I mean, it turns into this big glob. So I've done this before where I've dumped in a bunch of this Soil Moist, and it's been like a big like jelly field in the container. So use sparingly, but this does help with water retention. This can help a lot, like if you have hanging baskets that has sort of that core or that moss lining that tends to dry out a lot more, that's when I use this more. This tends to be really effective in hanging baskets. And then also doing a top dressing will help retain moisture, whether it's gravel or it's moss of some sort, that will help retain moisture too in the drought. Okay, so I thought we would do a little fun thing, and I hope that it works. So I thought I would do a demonstration on how to plant a container. And I want to give you 3 different options for what you want to see me plant. And you can vote on them by raising your little hand on the Zoom. So the hand is usually either at the bottom of your screen or the top of your screen, or like on an iPad, it's click the more and it pops down, and you can raise your hand to vote. So the 3 container choices are going to be succulent combination, flower combination, or herb combination. So if you want to see me do a succulent combination, raise your hand. You see it? Are there hands?
27.
27?
More. 30.
30, okay. Okay, so let's erase that. So about 30 people want succulent. If you want a flower combination, raise your hand. A lot of flowers.
40-ish.
40-ish. Okay, and if you want an herb combination, raise your hand.
Ooh, it's so close. I think you'll have to put flowers and herbs together.
Well, okay, spoiler, I'm gonna put them all together. Okay, so I wanted to show you this because, like I said, I really want you to keep your mind open when you go to design your container, and really see it as a fun opportunity to just play with plants. You know, don't overthink it. That's the biggest hurdle. Put plants together that you like. You know, some aren't gonna work out, some are gonna work out, and it's sort of take out the ones that don't work out, and you know, the ones that do work out will grow in and whatnot. So it's an evolving thing. So I'm gonna use this fiber light pot. And one thing that people always ask me about with containers is, do I use gravel at the bottom of the container? I don't, okay? And here's my reason. I will if it doesn't have a drainage hole, but if it has a drainage hole, I do not use gravel at the bottom. I feel like it actually can dry out the root capillaries at the bottom and make it hard for the plant to absorb moisture. And so what I like to do is I use a screen like this. See that? It's called Keeper Stopper. And it's just like it's like a window screen, and it comes in a pack of 5. And I just take it, so it's like this, and I usually quarter it like this. So I mean, the package lasts a long time because all you really need is a little piece like that. And I just put this over the drainage hole like that. And what that does is that helps keep the soil in, and then it also helps with slugs and earwigs and whatnot coming in from underneath the pot. So, and then another advantage is that you use the entirety of the pot. You've got the entire you know, size of the pot filled with soil, so you have more root space. If you do, just a little tip, if you do need to weight down a container, sometimes if you have a windy patio or whatnot, you want to weight down the container. I do recommend doing gravel at the bottom then. And then what I do is I cover the gravel with like a weed block. So that helps, so the soil doesn't sort of like, you know, drain into the gravel and whatnot. So I cover the gravel with the weed block, and then I'll put the soil on top of that, and the weed block's kind of like the screen. Conversely, if you want to lighten up a container, I've used styrofoam peanuts before. So you can recycle styrofoam peanuts and fill up the container to whatever, and then put that weed block over it, and then fill in with the soil and continue on from there. So that's just a couple tips, if you know, for lightening up or weighting down a pot. Okay, so I am gonna combine flowers and herbs and succulents. And because I'm doing that, I'm gonna combine potting soil and cactus succulent mix. So I already have an open bag of potting soil here. I'm just gonna dump that. So I'm gonna do about half and half. And I'll put in soil So when I set in the plants, they're about a ½ inch below the rim of the pot. It's important to keep a little bit of space between the top of the pot and the soil level, so you have a little bit of a water reservoir. So the water doesn't just run off the sides. And then I'm gonna mix this so it's all even consistency throughout the pot. Okay, like that. And then I recommend this for everything. I use this on everything in the ground and in containers. It's a transplant food called Sure Start. And what I like to say is, you know, there is an application rate on the fertilizer, but I usually say it's kind of like powdering a donut. Like, you don't want to dump a big pile of it. So just dust it in. The difference between this soil and some other soils is it needs to make contact with the roots of the plant. So you want to put it in the planting hole before you set the plants in. So like I said, I'm just gonna go like that. Let me see. Okay. And then I'm gonna choose my plants, and every time I do this kind of seminar, people, when I used to do this in person, people would be like, oh my gosh, she's gonna put another plant. Okay, my philosophy, and Dan knows this, and Taylor knows this, for many years they've known me, I don't wanna wait for a pot to grow in, okay? I want a full pot to start. I mean, who wants to wait for it to grow in, right? So I will plant, I'll combine things, I'll combine annuals and perennials. The thing is, with annual plants, what's good about them is they sort of fill the space of the pot while the perennials are growing in. And then as the annuals are dying back, you can pull those out and the perennials go to fill in that space. So it just adds, it makes for a longer, fuller pot. Okay. So I'm really liking this one today for some reason. When you get the plants out of the pot, you just squeeze it like that. You just kind of squeeze it and pull from the top. I also want to show you that I typically don't massage the roots a lot when I'm planting in a container. I think it's more important when you're planting in the ground. But you can rip off the roots if you need that space like I do. So I'm just gonna, like that, I'm just gonna take that off.
Ouch.
And it's okay, it's still alive. Okay, I'm gonna put that in. That's a petunia. I'm gonna put in, this is a verbena. And again, I'm gonna rip that. Okay, this is a marigold. So this is an annual. Okay, and this is a sage. This is an herb. This is edible. And see how, I mean, I didn't mean for this to happen, but look how that purple is like playing off each other, right? So see the leaf tone? So you don't have to have color in the flower. I mean, you can add stuff with leaf tone. And again, see that root? I'm like gonna just rip it off. And then I gotta put in a succulent. All right, and I do want to have, how's that looking from that side? Is that all right?
Looks great from this side.
Okay. I do want a little bit of a spiller, so I'm gonna take this. And another thing is you can take off the roots like that, like we've not been doing. You can also split the plants. So I'm just gonna rip that in half.
You can't do that with every plant, right?
No, you can't. You want to look at the plant and just see, you know, like this one, you can see several different sprouts coming up from the dirt. And that kind of just, it tells you, like, I could even take this and pull it apart even more. Like all of these are going to be their own plants. But what that does is it gives me a smaller plant so we can tuck it in. We'll just see how it looks for a second. Okay, I've got more space. I'm gonna okay, I'm gonna add a little bit of alyssum here. Over here. You know, everything's pretty much shoulder to shoulder. You know, not a ton of space in between each plant. So I don't have to go around and fill in that much, but what you do want to do, should I see it from that side? Yeah. What you do want to do is go around and fill it in. So tuck all the plants, just tuck all the plants in. I just kind of like go around and feel around, and if I need to add more soil, then I'll just tuck it in. You can decide whether or not you want to add moss. I mean, I don't really feel like I need to in this container because it's pretty full, but I will show you how to do it anyways. So the thing about moss is this is another opportunity, or gravel. This is another opportunity to add a design element to your container. There's moss, there's like any color under the rainbow now of moss, basically. And they're all, a lot of them are dyed with food grade dyes. So you can have, you know, a bit more of a electric feel to the container, or a bit more like a natural feel or whatnot, you know, just depending on whatever moss you're using, or gravel. I've kind of been liking this nude moss lately. I like that it's a little bit more green, but like I said, this is just a purely aesthetic choice. So then you just take the moss and tuck it around the plant. So moss is kind of like the equivalent to bark in the garden. It gives it that instant finished designer, like, you know, edge, I guess. And it's really easy to do. All right, how's that look?
Wunderbar.
Yep. Okay.
Now this one has kind of a front and a back, right? Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, Dan. So that is something to consider, is how are you going to be seeing your container? You know, I could have done this so that the bigger stuff is in the center, and we could have put fillers around all around, so you see it all around. So yeah, you're right. This is the back is towards me, and the front is towards you, because that's where the spiller is going. Should we pause for a couple questions, and then I'll go on to troubleshooting?
Yes, definitely. Let me grab a few. We've had some pretty good questions going through. I've answered some of them as we've been going, but some of a nice one that we have is when you were maybe talk a little bit more about why you're ripping off the bottom of the roots sometimes, or what that can do to the plant's like speed at growing into the pot, or if you're doing it for space or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, it can help. Like you saw some of the roots, like this root, I mean, that's super compacted. So on one level, it can help just loosen up the roots and get it, just get it to be able to sort of stretch out into the space. I think for me, I mostly usually do it just to have space, because you see how tightly I pack it. So I just want to be sure everything has enough space. It's also something like if you have a shallower container, or shallower hanging basket, then that sort of gives you some more room to play with, and with that less root space, I guess.
Yeah, and the new roots kind of start forming, and it kind of they break into the pot a little bit easier sometimes. I do know what you mean, and a lot of times it is for space, and they can recover pretty easily. Depends on the plant, but they can. We have some questions about planting in pots with drainage holes versus no drainage holes, and some tips for why you do one over the other and how you can kind of deal with that.
Okay, so I think I need to plan a terrarium class at some point, because that is the same principles as a pot with no drainage. There are a lot of indoor containers don't have any drainage, because a lot of times they're used for cache pots. So, and basically that just means like you don't plant directly in them, you just set the plant in it. But if you did want to plant directly into a container with no drainage, don't let it stop you, basically. What I recommend for a container with no drainage is putting a layer of charcoal first. The charcoal helps saturate any standing, or neutralize any standing water, so it doesn't smell funky, basically. So put in the charcoal, and then I usually say put in a layer of gravel. If you're making a terrarium and it's a container that's a glass container and you can see the layers of it, the charcoal and the gravel can be a design element to your pot. You can't over charcoal a pot, so I mean you could do an inch of charcoal if you want. And it's a nice black layer, or just do a thin black layer, and then the gravel, of course, there's like, a million different colors and whatnot of gravel. This is like a tannish. I have like a gray, I mean, so that, like I said, it's an opportunity to, if it is a clear container, have another design element happening. But if it's just at bare minimum with no drainage, a layer of charcoal, about an inch of gravel, and then you can put the soil.
Yeah.
The advantage, I mean, so I guess if you have a terrarium and you can see the sides of it, obviously that's more helpful, because you can see if there's any standing water and you don't overwater it. That's the danger.
Yes.
That's the danger if you have, an opaque container with no drainage, that you would overwater it and it would just be sitting in water. And so you really want to you really want to pay attention to your watering.
Which is why you have that charcoal, is to kind of help neutralize any of the extra standing water. But it's always good. I've also recommend people to carefully, almost every once in a while, if you have a pot with no drainage, water it deeply and almost kind of tip it out and rinse it out a little bit, get some of the extra salts and bacteria that are building up at the bottom out, because that's your biggest problem. Is long term it's going to affect your bottom roots a little bit harshly.
Totally.
Yeah. We have a few more coming in, but let's see if I can grab you at least one more. They're wondering, when you're packing the plants a little bit more thickly inside your pots, if you're making a little bit more of a full or container to start with, is your watering going to increase? And maybe some tips for how you're going to kind of like properly water it without the water spilling all over the place or being a problem there.
That's a good question. I mean, so across the board, whether you're talking watering in a container or in the ground, we're not gonna like water like this. Like the water, I'm not gonna like take a hose and just water over the top of all of the plants. What you're gonna wanna do is with a watering can or with a hose, get in around the base of it. It's really important to water the soil more than the leaves of the plants. That helps reduce molds and fungus that can grow on your leaves and whatnot. And also, if there's water drops on your leaves and it's a bright sunny day, it's kind of like a magnifying glass on the leaf, and that can burn it as well. So it's really more efficient to just water around the base of the plants. This is full, but I can still, it's probably hard to see there, but you can still work in a hose like all around this, or work in, a watering can or whatnot. So, yeah, this is definitely workable.
Nice. Yeah, well, if anyone else has some more questions, keep on bringing them in. We'll kind of continue forward.
Yeah, I just have a few more things to say, because like I said, I want to try to keep this at 45 minutes. So I know it's a ton of information, and I do welcome your questions. I want to be sure to save time for the questions. So basic care and troubleshooting. I think containers like in-ground planting, one of the biggest things is issues can be watering. And whether it's over or under watering. And the thing is no matter if the plant is in the ground or in a container, you always want to err on the side of under watering. And this is pretty important to know, because a plant can come back from dehydration much easier than oversaturation. If the roots are rotted out, they can't come back pretty much. If they're dehydrated, a lot of times you can bring them back. And so you always want to err on the side of underwatering. And this is critical to know too, because the signs of overwatering and underwatering are very similar. So the plant can actually start looking wilted if it's been overwatered. And the worst thing to do is to go water it. And so, pay attention, feel the soil. That's the best indicator of if the plant needs water. Feel the soil, lift up the pot. If it's a lighter pot, if you can lift up the pot, that'll tell you if it needs soil or not, if you can lift it right up or whatnot. And so pay attention to your watering. It's hard to say across the board what a normal watering schedule for containers is. A lot of people ask me that. That's going to depend on your own environment, and if it's windy and if it's more sunny. And so getting to learn your own environment is critical. I'd say as a general ballpark, most containers are, you want to water them 2 or 3 times a week. And that's, adjust based on your environment, but I would say that's like a general ballpark. You also want to be sure that when you do water, that the water goes through the pot, that it drains out the bottom of the pot. And this is important to know, so we know that the water is saturating through the soil. It's also important because if the water doesn't flush through the pot, it can build up a lot of salt and calcium in your container that can actually burn the plants over time. This a lot of times is an issue with indoor plants because it's kind of hard to water them effectively. And so even if you have like a patio situation where water can't go down on your neighbor's patio below you or something. Even in those 2 situations, if you can either take the plant like in your shower or in your kitchen sink or something like that 4 times a year or more ideally, just to give it that thorough flush through, that's gonna be really helpful to the plants. I also want to, oh yeah.
So Jen, when you say err on the side of underwatering, that doesn't mean give it just a teaspoon of water. It means water less often, right?
Thank you. Exactly. Exactly.
But
Less
water
often, but
thoroughly
thorough.
when you do water.
yeah, instead of more often, but shallow. Okay, I hope that makes sense, but thank you for clarifying. And then I also want to say that I'm anti-saucer. I know, because a lot of times, shock, I'm sorry, because of this reason, okay? So you don't want the pots to be sitting in a saucer of water. It's like having your feet in a bathtub for hours, right? It's not good for the plants. If you do have to have a saucer, what I recommend doing is lifting it up in the saucer. So you can either, there's these like plastic, this is called a surface saver. You can put this under the pot, but inside the saucer if you still need the saucer for your water situation. Or this is another one. You can cut off the rungs to the size to fit under your pot. I have this is my office plants, but I do, on some of them, I'll do a little gravel. And so that just separates any standing water from the pot. This is also a technique for indoor plants for helping create humidity. We were joking here this morning, my office is like a rainforest. We had to open the door. I mean, it's very humid in here, and I've got everything on gravel, so anyway. But also, you can use like pot feet too. So you can lift the container up, and keep in mind for your decks, so pot feet are like a little tripod. If you're concerned about your patio or your deck staining, the stain comes from no air circulation. So if you have a saucer directly on your patio, that will stain it. So even lifting the saucer, if you have to have a saucer, lift the saucer up off your deck with one of these surface savers. Have the saucer and then do a layer of gravel or do another, smaller surface saver on the inside, and then set your plant in. And so then we make sure that the plant has adequate drainage and that there's air circulation under your saucer and we don't stain your deck. Okay, I have to stress, I'm like kind of obsessed with saucer. I'm sorry if that, or obsessed with not liking saucer. Okay. And then also remember that just maintaining your container, you want to deadhead. The more you deadhead your plants, the more you promote flowers. So when flowers dry up and go to seed, the plant has performed its entire function. It's not here to be pretty, it's here to reproduce. And so if it gets to that point where it's forming seed, you want to take that off and tell the plant to make more flowers. And so deadheading is critical. I do also want to go over a little bit about fertilizer, and then we'll take a few questions. I think we're good on time. Okay. So fertilizer, I recommend liquid fertilizer for containers. I like liquid fertilizer for containers because it's absorbed quicker. And since you don't have a ton of soil to retain nutrients, I like it to be absorbed faster. Pay attention to whatever liquid fertilizer you're using. It will tell you on the fertilizer how frequently that you can use it. No matter what, always water first, like you would normally water, and then water with the fertilizer solution. You make sure that you don't burn the plants when you water first, and then it also will retain more nutrients if it's watered first before you water it with the fertilizer solution. So I like this. I tend to do pretty much all organic gardening. Fox Farms are really good liquid fertilizers, and they have a liquid bloom food, which I really like. And then Maxi is a seaweed-based fertilizer, and there is an all-purpose and a bloom food. If you can zoom up on the numbers, we'll go over this. So all the fertilizers have 3 numbers on them. So this is 16, 16, 16. And just really quickly and very simply, the first number is nitrogen, the second is phosphorus, and the third is potassium. So it's NPK, but you can remember it, and this is very simply, as leaves, flowers, roots. So if you have something that has a higher first number, then you'll be encouraging more green leaves. If you have something that has a higher second number, then you're going to be encouraging more flowers. The last number is kind of like roots and overall health of the plant. So you can see with the bloom food here, it's 3-20-20. So we're barely putting any energy into the leaves, but we're promoting the health and the flower in the same percentage with the 20-20, if that makes sense. Okay, I know that was a lot of information. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right. You actually have gone through a lot of the questions. You were kind of hitting them as you were going. So that's really good there. One thing I wanted to kind of bring up and maybe have you talk about is as a container planter being something that is permanent, it's something that you can have for a long time, something short period, like how do you deal with it in the longer run? Like after you have it planted for a little while, what's your tips for like a long-term kind of planter in your area?
Yeah, okay, again, to reiterate, you're gonna assess it every 4 to 6 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like this container, I'll be taking out the marigolds, I'll be pinching back the petunias and probably the verbena, the sage is gonna grow. This might, I might be thinning this out a little bit. So it's gonna be a constant assessment. If you, if you're in a situation where you're doing, say, an edible container or lettuce bowl or something like that, and you're gonna dump whatever it is once it's finished, if you can at least replace 50% of the soil when you go to replant, I think that's at minimum what you should do, because you need to put back in nutrients into that space for the new batch of plants, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Because if it's growing in the pot, all the plant has is whatever you give it. So we have to like kind of keep on giving it some more. And that's why I think talking about the fertilizers is really important. And also the idea of the liquid fertilizers versus the granular ones, they're a little bit different. They do similar stuff, but kind of knowing how that's going to affect the pot is really important. Some also questions, I think you talked about a little bit earlier, but having really tall planters versus really wide planters and kind of like how that affects some of the plants inside of it. And you should kind of just like pay attention to certain things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there is certain things that I will say, like if you're doing a fruit tree, if you're doing a citrus or an apple tree or something, at minimum you want a 22 to 24 inch container, wide and deep. But if you're doing a succulent bowl, you can put the same plants in this pot as you would also put in this pot. You could also put in this pot. So pay attention to what plants you're using. And in terms of like if it would benefit you to have a deeper container or not, basically. Yeah.
And also like you're talking about before, you can have the whole thing with soil and it's totally fine, but also you can use other things like the rocks and stuff to kind of lighten up at least the bottom, or even increase the weight on the bottom. I've definitely like the have next to you, the plastic ones. I've definitely heard people talk about they're a little bit lighter weight pottery, which is nice if you want to move it around, but it also means if you have a very tall, heavy plant on top, having some like rocks in the bottom kind of increases that bottom weight, which I think is important sometimes if it's in a windy spot.
Absolutely.
People have some good questions. I think it's a little bit different stuff, but about indoor plants, but also they're asking about like light levels and how you should deal or think about when you have a combination planter, the light that you're going to be giving it, and sometimes also understanding that some plants require more or less, and that might affect them differently, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good example of a little bit of like a combination. I mean, this is kind of a part, the succulent and the Lysmachia. This is called Creeping Jenny. This is kind of like part sun plants, and these are full sun plants. So this planter, I think, would do well in 4 to 5 hours of sun. And based on where you are, that might be 4 to 5 hours of morning sun. If you have super intense, like if you're in Nevada or in Danville or something, if you're in the city in the sunset, you can put it in the afternoon sun for 5 hours. So, just pay attention to your environment and get to know, watch the plants, they'll tell you.
See how they grow, yeah. And even how you have them, the trailing ones are the lower light level ones. You can have it faced away so the sun hits more of the higher bright areas. And then the shade out the shadier plants, which works like a little ecosystem, like you're saying, their own little ecosystem.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I don't fully know the answer to this question. I don't think so, but is soil moist, is it biodegradable? I guess I don't think it really breaks down.
Okay. One isn't. There does exist a soil moist version that I believe is corn gluten based, and we don't have it now, but I've seen it, so that is something that you can look for, and the corn gluten would break down.
And we haven't had too many questions about this, but it's always something to bring up because everyone always wants to know about like pest issues and stuff. And you went over some kind of tactics for that, but your go-to recommendations for dealing with pests, either through biological or spray needs and stuff like that, especially when we're planting close together, it's something you have to pay attention to, I'm sure.
My go-to is I don't spray anything. I use pesticides or fungicides. I'm a purist that way. I don't know, but no judgment if you do. I realize that there's some situations that you might need to. What I tend to do is just try to stay on top of it. If you see aphids, I will hand squish aphids on the plant. If you hand squish them, they release this sort of like danger pheromone that at least somebody told me that at one point. I don't know if it's true, but like I like the idea. And it tells the other aphids not to come there. And then I just spray everything off with the hose too. So if you blast them off with the hose, a lot of times that will knock the aphid off. And then like in the city and stuff, you'll be worried about powdery mildew. If things are planted, if there's not as much air circulation, sometimes you'll get that, and just hand picking off the most infested leaves just helps reduce the population of it. If you're planting in the sunset, you're gonna have powdery mildew no matter what. I mean, it's like, like there's like a certain level of just kind of like, you have to accept that it's not gonna be entirely perfect, but just staying on top of it and trying to keep the population down as much as possible. That just keeps it under control.
Yeah, and I think also when you're saying airflow and stuff, even though they're planted kind of close, as they grow, leaves and stuff die away and stems die away, and going in and cleaning those out and taking out the dying and decaying matter, which is totally normal and natural. But if you take it out, then it reduces that clutter that a lot of the bugs tend to like. And then I was saying, the one main spray I end up using is like a neem oil, which is nice and organic. So if you have to, spray plant or something like that, we definitely sell those, and come talk to us at the store. We'll go through those with you. But
snail, we can talk about snails just really quick, because that can be an issue in the city a lot, but there's copper tape that you can get, and you can put that around the top of the pot, and that is that electrocutes them as they pass over it.
yeah.
Which can be really effective, and so and it's not a spray or anything, and so that's a way to get the snails, and hand picking them off going out at night with a
Totally.
flash. Yeah.
I think one of the biggest tips. Go for it, Dan.
The bowl of beer, he says.
Oh, yeah, putting that out. One of the biggest tips I always have for people is to go out at night. I think most pests that you're going to have eating your plants. I had someone asking earlier about pests eating their container plants. Most of them are very active at nighttime. So your snails, your cut worms, all your caterpillars and pincher bugs and all those kinds of bugs are all eating at nighttime. So if you go out, you can kind of see what's affecting your plant, and then it's easier to diagnose it and deal with it later.
Yeah.
And again, totally, like diatomaceous earth is another really good one, especially if you have like ants and stuff too. It's a nice organic way to put over your soil. We have a few different things at our stores. So
that works really well. The diatomaceous earth, it's like crushed up exoskeletons, and so it's sharp, for snails and slugs and fungus gnats if you have that. So and it's like a powder, and you can put it over the top of the soil. So yeah. Good. That was a good point to bring up.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm going to quickly see if I can grab any last ones, but is there any final thoughts you want to throw out there, Jen?
No, I mean, I think my passion overall, I've been doing this for so many years, is really to make gardening accessible to people. I think that there's an intimidation factor, whatever you're doing, if it's edibles or containers or ground planting and whatnot. And so I think the biggest message I want to send is just to have fun and experiment, and don't overthink it. And some plants might not work out and other plants will, and you'll be learning either way. And just try it out, keep gardening, keep planting.
Yeah. And so we have our questions open. So Jen has an email that many people have been throwing some questions towards her, especially after these seminars. That is always a great way to learn some more, is kind of talk with us through email, or also absolutely coming to the stores and talk to our staff. We can answer lots of questions there. And then keep on attending these webinars. I'm going to go over them again really fast. We have a bunch of really exciting spotlight seminars or webinars coming up that we've been really excited to get going. So on Wednesdays at 5 o'clock, so it's a slightly different time than right now, Wednesdays at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Next week, we have a farm to table cooking webinar, which sounds really cool. And I do a lot of cooking, especially with the stuff in my garden. So I would like to see the recipes and the ideas that this chef will come up with to talk to us about growing with the stuff that you plant, cooking with the stuff that you grow. As well as the week after that, on the July 14th, again at Wednesday, it's going to be a bee-friendly gardening webinar. So if you're interested in bees, or what they're doing for the environment, or how to take care of them, or how to be a great bee gardener, or a gardener that is great with bees, then definitely attend that one and listen to her. She sounds really cool, and I'm excited about that one. And then 2 weeks after that one, we have a photography webinar about smartphone photography for gardening, and how you take pictures of plants, and using your different kinds of techniques with our smartphones to take better pictures and get more out of that. So that's something I think I need. So I'm going to definitely be attending and watching that one with everyone here as well.
Yeah, Taylor,
yeah.
I want to remind everyone too that there's recordings of everything that we've done on our website. There's a ton of information, everyone. So if you have questions on watering, we have a WaterWise webinar recording. If you have a question on peppers, Dan did a pepper seminar. A wealth of information. What's nice about the recordings is you can rewind and pause and go back and fast forward and whatnot. So that is a wealth of information on our website under the Learn tab. And then it's garden videos under that. And we have like at least 30, I think.
Yeah,
webinars.
it's how you found your way into this webinar, so it's right there.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think everyone can get going on their Saturday. It seems like a nice day, and we'll have a lot of planting out there and make some containers, right?
yeah, absolutely. Happy gardening. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.